Congressman Farr has been tireless on advocating for the ocean, as he says, putting the O back in NOAA, which we all know is a priority. He's a big fan of the agency. He's a big fan of the resource. He's a big fan of the people who depend on the resource. And we really don't have a better champion in either side of Congress than Congressman Sam Farr. So it's my great honor to welcome him up. Before I do, I want to say one initiative that should be on the mind of everybody in this room and everybody in this town, and it's his signature legislation, and it's Oceans 21. And we need to be committed, redouble our efforts to see that become law. Congressman Farr, thank you for everything you do for the ocean.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here, and thank you for all being the troops with Ocean 21. We decided we're not going to call it that anymore because there's a right-wing conspiracy called Agenda 21 saying that came out of Brazil many years ago, and they think that that's a world takeover of power, and we just never even thought that they would be related. And anyway, there's people, I got lobbied against that bill by the Idaho Potato Association saying that if we passed the bill, they would put them out of business. So we got to figure out a better way to sell it. But fortunately, I mean, I'll get into our topic, but the National Ocean Policy, the President had the guts to and it took guts. He did this, and it's great. There needs to be some legislation to create the regional councils and the process that he couldn't create by executive order. But the whole framework for how we have a national ocean policy has all been set up. So half that bill, or 3/4 of the bill, was in the President's order, and it's just the legislative parts, the procedures that need to be set up. I've been asked here to kick off this panel called Boosting Economic Growth, Job Creation, Coastal Tourism, and Ocean Recreation. Wow, what a title. I was trying to think about, I'm co-chair of the House Tourism Caucus, so I'm always talking about tourism. And what people don't realize is you're all here for business meetings, but you're not being counted that. You're being counted by the Washington Business and Convention Center as tourists, because we define tourists, at least when I was in the California legislature, as anybody more than 60 miles away from their home. Because it takes 60 miles away from home, you're going to eat at a restaurant, you're going to probably go into a gas station out of town and fill up your tank. You may even spend the night, and that makes you a tourist. So, we think about what are the values of the ocean and the economic value of it, and all we have to realize is how people prioritize it in their own being. A couple of factoids. California, 36 million people, 5th largest economy on the planet. You know what the #1 attraction California is? Attractions. You think of Disneyland, right, or Universal Studios. The #1 attraction that more people go to than anything else is the Los Angeles County beaches. Free, accessible, it's the ocean. How many of you in this room have been to Hawaii? Most of you. You didn't go there because they have Costco's and Starbucks. That's not why you went. Hawaii is the #1 destination islands in the world. And islands as a total are the destination all over the world where people go more than any other place. Why do they go to islands? Because they're surrounded by water. They're surrounded by oceans. We love the oceans. We just haven't done a very good job of turning our love for the oceans and our love for sea creatures and our love for recreation into economic indicators. We ought to be up there whenever there's a discussion about the economy of America, talking about the value of tourism, but more than that, we have to break it down. The value, the economic value. And there is a center in my district in Monterey at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, and there's a woman named Dr. Judith Kildow, who's the director of National Ocean Economics Program. And she and Dr. Jason Sorke at the Center for the Blue Economy, or at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, are doing groundbreaking work of taking all this tourist information, all the economic data, and showing people what the value of it is. And where they really came into demand was during the Gulf oil spill. Do you remember what the request was? Get people back here. Put a lot of money into tourism. and BP had to put tons of money, millions and millions of dollars up, and they worked with the local stuff. But what I want to just leave with you is, look, the trend is moving all in the right direction. Watchable wildlife, and this is out of Megatrends. Watchable wildlife, defined as watchable wildlife, has more participants than all, and this is just shocking, than all of the national sports, all the baseball, all the football, all the basketball, all the hockey, all of that. Watchable wildlife is a bigger economic indicator in our country. And in my own district, I've seen that trend change from Monterey was the sardine capital of the world, Cannery Row, right? And it collapsed because we overfished it. And guess what? We kind of developed then, we had all these boats, and people said, well, let's just go out and party boats and catch all the other fish that are out there. We'll do it sport fishing. And I was a kid growing up in that, and I couldn't wait to get on those boats. You know what those boats are selling now? They're not selling fishing trips. You can only make one trip a day. You only a limited number of people. They all get upset when their lines get all tangled. There's greasy bait all over the deck. They don't catch enough fish. The fish aren't big enough. There are lots of complaints. And they get home in the afternoon, they're tired and full of scales. Now the boat operators take out 4 or 5 loads a day of people watching whales, paying just as much or more, and actually seeing them because we know how to find them very quickly. So our watchable wildlife has turned into one of our most successful ocean tourism, and obviously the aquarium is the #1 draw in Central California, one of the highest visited places in California. So my ask of you, because we're just on the verge of trying to translate and identify what are these economic indicators, because the bottom of it all is you don't destroy it. We don't destroy the Yosemites in order to get more people in there. We don't hunt bears in Yosemite to feed the population. It's not a place where you go and take for gain. You take pictures, not trees and bears and things like that. So why can't we do a better job of explaining, because it is all about this, it's all you're back here about money. This is what I'm on the appropriations committee, and they all, every day, 9, 10 people a day come to my office and want money for something, rightfully so, and I'm there and I'm glad they're there. But it's all about economics. That's all we're talking about. The budget and why NOAA gets cut. We don't have enough money. We're going to cut, squeeze, and trim NOAA. And when I got mad at NOAA is they're going to give all that money to satellites and take it out of the ocean. That's when I got up and said, enough is enough. We're going to change the name to NOAA. We're just going to call it NAW. Because we've taken the O out of NOAA, and you're the people that got to put it back in. So what we're going to do, if we want to be taken seriously, we've got to talk in Wall Street terms. Now, Wall Street's pretty good at supporting environmental causes with foundations and things like that, and Wall Street's been very good on the National Endowment for the Arts. It's all those Fortune 500 companies that write letters and say, we need the National Endowment for the Arts in order for our foundations and our interest in culture to be guided by really good leadership, and we need the foundation to do it. So we do have that thing, but we're still not in the same room. We're not able to talk that language. So I want you to go home and quantify economically, dollars and cents, the value of all the jobs, of all the materials, and think about how we can connect dots. And I'll leave at the end here with out of Hawaii again. The wonderful thing about Hawaii is you're captive. You're on an island. But you know what is interesting? I mean, people, when you ask them, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to the Hawaiian Islands. They usually, well, what island you're going to? And say, well, I'm going to Maui. That's it. But you know what they do? That's where they go. It's a destination. And the minute they get there, they say, well, now what's there to do here? They're not just going to lie on the beach. That may be part of it. But they're going to go up to Haleakala and maybe ride a bicycle down. They're going to go down to Hana and see what old windy, crooked roads are about. They're going to go visit the waterfalls. They're going to go do all these other things. They're going to find out how they can drink things with pineapple in it. They're going to go out and buy a Hawaiian shirt. They're going to buy some music. They're going to spend a lot of money on doing a lot of Hawaiiana, flowers and everything, and bring it all home, macadamia nuts, Kona coffee and all. You all have that in your district. Why do we have to just go to Hawaii to sell Kona coffee, or why not sell California coffee? Or maybe, no, we don't have that in California, but, you know, the point is there's something there that can make for tourism to grow. It's the fastest growing industry in the world. It's an industry without glass ceilings. It's an industry without PhDs. It's an industry of people. And that industry is more than anything else about the oceans. So let's capture the moment. Let's make the economy of the oceans the most important economy in the United States. Thank you very much.
Congressman, thank you. That was wonderful. You mentioned that Americans love the ocean, and I think everybody here in this room, I can speak for everybody, to say that we love you and all of the work that you do on behalf of the ocean. And to put brass tacks to everything that the Congressman just said in terms of the aspiration and idealism and how do we reach the goal of the Congressman, we have the next panel to get to that very point. And to lead the next panel, we have Isabel Hill, who's the director of the Office of Travel and Tourism Industries within the Department of Commerce. There are many countries around the world that have entire departments dedicated to promoting tourism in their country. What we have is what Isabel Hill leads within the Department of Commerce. And in that role, she led the government in developing the National Travel and Tourism Strategy, which came out last year, and fosters competitiveness of the U.S. travel and tourism industry. It's the only thing we've got in terms of a blueprint for tourism, and Isabel was the one who led that effort. Her office, when Congressman Farr talks about the statistics and the numbers and how impressive tourism is, it's also Isabel's office that is the only office in the U.S. government that's compiling those statistics in terms of what we have and what we can offer. So we're excited that she's here today. We're excited that we've got a wonderful panel. Let me remind folks that there are volunteers, if you could raise your hands, walking up and down with question cards if the one on your seat is not enough. And with that, let me turn it over to the moderator. Isabel, please.
Can you hear me? Is it on? Great. Thank you. And thank you, Representative Farr, for everything that you do leading the Travel and Tourism Caucus and for all that you do for environmental stewardship. If there is a lesson from the comments today, it's don't follow Congressman Farr when you have to make your remarks. They were very inspirational. Thank you. It is a great honor for me to be here today to moderate this panel and to join such a distinguished group of participants. And I was especially pleased to be invited here today because I think that this is such an important conversation. So often the protection of our natural resources is put at odds with economic development. And I hope that today's panel will put a different spin on that conversation. And I think that today's panelists will bring a different perspective to that discussion. So let me begin by putting that discussion in context. Travel and tourism is critical to the U.S. economy. Last year, domestic and international travel posted $144 trillion in sales. This represents 2.7% of the entire gross national product of the United States. That's a significant contribution to our GDP. It supports 7.7 million jobs across the United States. Now, recognizing its importance, in early 2012, President Obama issued an executive order on travel and tourism, calling for the development of a national travel and tourism strategy. The strategy was led by the Secretary of the Department of Commerce and the Secretary of the Interior, who led a task force on travel competitiveness, a task force that was comprised of 12 core cabinet agencies across the federal government whose portfolios include responsibility for aspects that touch on travel and tourism. That would include everything from the Department of State, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Transportation, the Department of the Interior, the Army Corps of Engineers, and all of them came together to develop a comprehensive government-wide approach to the development of travel and tourism. The National Travel and Tourism Strategy articulates two simple goals. number one, to welcome 100 million visitors by 2021 that we expect will spend $250 billion annually in our economy. And secondly, to encourage Americans to see all that America has to offer. In this context, there is a rich emphasis at looking at America's special places, including our marine sanctuaries, beaches, and oceans. The strategy requires a whole-of-government approach to implementation, and the numerous agencies have now come together through the Tourism Policy Council to implement the national strategy. This is to create a business environment for growth for travel and tourism and to implement the strategy over time. This is a large commitment across the federal government, and I know that all of the agencies are actively engaged in the working groups moving towards the objectives of the strategy. The results of this effort in the last year since the strategy was released have been positive. Growth in tourism is leading growth in the economy overall. Real travel and tourism grew 2.7% in 2012, which significantly outpaces the 2.2% growth of the economy overall. And in 2012, travel and tourism created jobs at 4 times the rate as the economy as a whole. The number of international visitors and exports, when international visitors come to the United States, they're bringing new money into our economy, and so we count those as exports. And exports from travel and tourism is on track to set another record in 2012. Those numbers will be officially released on Monday. And arrivals are projected to have increased 6% over 2011, and revenues at approximately 10%. So this is far greater than the required 5% growth that is required to meet our goal in the National Travel and Tourism Strategy. So we're off to a very good start. So what does this mean to you? I can only imagine perhaps that some of you are sitting here in horror, considering the incredible growth of travel and tourism and what that might do to the environment. And so, you know, we need to look, as the Congressman said, a little bit more deeply at how travel and tourism and the ocean's economy fit together. Coastal tourism and recreation is helping to fuel this increase in travel and tourism, becoming more and more important to coastal communities across the U.S. economy. And in fact, there's some very interesting information that has come out of the work at Sea Grant about how coastal communities are recognizing the importance of travel and tourism to their economic well-being, and they are working now to incorporate this into the strategic plan of Sea Grant communities. Between 2005 and 2009, when the overall U.S. employment, as you recall, was falling, coastal tourism and recreation grew by 2.7% and helped our nation to survive the recession, well above the 2.3% of growth during that time in total. In 2010, marine tourism and recreation accounted for 70% of the jobs created by the total ocean economy, 1.9 million American jobs in total. And so the oceans are sustaining us in numerous ways, not only through extractive enterprises, but increasingly through the consumptive enterprises like travel and tourism. And so I ask you, is this an opportunity or is it a threat? And I would say that that depends on what we do. Which brings us to today's panel, which has to do with the relationship between economic growth and environmental stewardship. Simply put, we believe it's pretty hard to have a robust coastal tourism and recreation economy if you don't preserve your coastal environment and resources for future visitors. And we have 5 panelists who will show us examples of how these priorities can be mutually reinforcing. I hope you're ready for an interesting discussion. We plan on approaching this as a conversation, and I hope that you all will join that conversation with questions and comments as we move forward, because you are a very critical part of the future moving forward. I know you have bios for everybody in your materials, so I'm not going to go through the introduction of our panel. We have Jeff Gray, the superintendent of the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. We have Rick Nolan, who is with the the principal of the Boston Harbor Cruises is next. Mike McCartney, who is the president and CEO of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. Tom Schmidt, who is the president and CEO of the Texas State Aquarium. And Pat Marr, who is with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. So each of the panel members is going to begin with making a presentation, and then we'll start a discussion on some of the themes that have emerged, and would invite you to participate in that discussion. Thank you very much. And Jeff, would invite you to start with your comments.
My name's Jeff Gray. I'm the superintendent of Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which is located in northern Michigan, about 4 hours north of Detroit on beautiful Lake Huron. Today I want to tell you the story about our community and how our community is using tourism to reinvent itself. But I need to tell you a little bit about our community first. We are one of the few industrial communities in northern Michigan, a long history of commercial fishing, lumbering, logging, paper making. The largest limestone quarry in North America is one of our claims to fame there, and several other manufacturing industries. But the community has been hit over the last couple of decades very, very badly by the economic downturn. Many of the factories that lined our riverfront and our waterfront are now shut down, and we have some of our counties up there have over 20% unemployment, and it's been this way for, like I say, over a decade. The Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary was designated in 2000, but if we back up a few years before that, in 1997, our city had a referendum. Do you want this sanctuary in your community? And 70% said, no, we do not want this sanctuary in our community. And it was very controversial between the state and NOAA as we tried to make this designation happen to protect this very special place. It did happen in 2000. 5 years later, we had a hearing to see if the sanctuary was able to stay. And our number one comment is that the sanctuary should increase in size by about nine times. I'm happy to say this week or this month we'll have a environmental impact statement that will be released for that expansion. And so how did this change happen in 5 short years? And it's because of the economic development and quality of life. And I think as we talk today, that it's really the same thing. Economic development and quality of life really go together. And people want to visit places that are nice to live. People want to start businesses in places that are nice to live. And what I believe has happened there is the sanctuary has played a role in making this wonderful community a better place to live. It's a small community of about 10,000 people. And the sanctuary was designated to protect about 200 historic shipwrecks within the sanctuary. And these are some of the best preserved shipwrecks in the world. We call them Disney shipwrecks. Some of them are intact ships, masts still standing incredible because of the cold, fresh water. And the Great Lakes are really one of the nation's most precious natural resources. The Great Lakes and oceans are really one, and when we say ocean, we mean Great Lakes, because these are critical to protect as well. Our branding is that we're unsalted and shark-free, so it's a great place to come visit us. But because of this industrial background that we've had, this part of Michigan was really never had a tourism boom. It was a great place to hunt and fish, and we had people like that, but it never developed the tourism like other parts of the state. Mackinac Island, Traverse City, Sheboygan, some of these other places that you've probably heard of. And so what's happening now in Alpena is it's making a transition from resource extraction and manufacturing to sustainable tourism and technology. And those really go together, and I'll talk about that briefly. And with the sanctuary's programs that we've developed, the community, and when I say community, it's the city, the county, the surrounding areas, has decided to take on a new branding effort and try to really change how the world sees Alpena, Michigan. And that new brand is Alpena, the Sanctuary of the Great Lakes. And it's more than just the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. We want the world to think of Alpena as find your sanctuary there. And so this is not advertising is different than branding. We need to earn this brand, and we need to become a sanctuary. And so all of the public policymakers, the communities, the businesses have joined together and developed an action plan of how do we make this a sanctuary. And that is with land, it's with education, land conservation, education, and of course the marine sanctuary and the expansion. Our view is we need to make it a great place to live. We want the youth to come back. We want businesses to form there. And if we do that, we make it a great place for us to live, the tourists will come. And when you talk about Hawaii, when you visit these places, you say, that would be a great place to live. And those are the places you want to visit. And that's what we're doing. And it is beyond the shipwrecks. It's about economic development. We think tourism is the front door to economic development. When tourists come up, they discover our area, and then they see business opportunities, both tourist-related and other areas. We've recently, based on this branding, received a designation from the state of Michigan, a Smart Zone designation, to attract marine science type businesses to our community. It's a TIF financing program that will help attract us, and this is because of the research that has been conducted by the sanctuary to preserve and protect the Great Lakes. Related to that, the education system has kind of joined on to this branding, where we began a marine technology program at our community college. Again, building this brand, how can we become who we really want to be? Even at the lower levels of education, where classes about the sanctuary and about preservation, conservation, marine technology are being taught throughout the system and being incorporated into the education curriculum throughout that. And so we're very excited about the possibilities. It is something, though, that we work on every single day. It is not, we're going to do some banners and that's it, do billboards. It's every decision that the Convention and Visitor Bureau makes, the Chamber of Commerce, the CVB, the city, the county, and the sanctuary goes back to this brand. What is going to earn this brand, and how are we going to make this a better place to live and work?
Thank you. I want to go already.
All right. July and August, there we
go.
Come visit us.
Maybe a workshop.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so very much. And Rick Nolan, the principal with Boston Harbor Cruises, will give us a different perspective from the private sector.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I very much appreciate it. I come from a small family business. My grandfather started Boston Harbor Cruises in 1926. I've been working there since 1967. This is a photograph of him, and when I went to work for him in that year, he was operating 2 deep-sea fishing boats, similar to what the congressman was talking about. We take people out deep-sea fishing and bring them back in, and hopefully, in the earlier years, we'd catch them something. In the 70s, we wouldn't catch them too much. So, at any event, I've been there my whole life. We transitioned into whale watching as one of our offerings in 1985. And quite honestly, it was something that took off almost automatically. It was a nice transition for us away from fishing and into whale watching. And in addition to that, we're doing a lot of sightseeing trips around the historic harbor of Boston. And as soon as we began to hear word of the potential of a sanctuary being designated for Stellwagen Bank in the late 80s and early 90s, we were, I think as an industry, not just as a company, concerned about what that meant for us. But at the end of the day, I have to tell you, it's been wonderful. The establishment of the National Marine Sanctuary in 1992, I believe it was, automatically started off on a good basis between the government officials that were designated to run the sanctuary and the industry itself. Everybody got together cooperatively. We had a advisory council to which I was a member, and we worked almost immediately on whale watching guidelines for the National Marine Sanctuary of Stellwagen, because we all recognize that as an important component of what this new designation meant. And I have to say that most of the industry members, my fellow whale watch operators and myself, were very embracive, I think, of the recommendations of the conservation community. The guidelines were established within about an 8-month period. They were implemented, automatically went into effect, and they've been in effect since then. And they've been working, I think, quite well. But it's been a remarkable transformation for our company, which is the component of whale watching to our business. It's grown our business dramatically. We started out, as you can see by the slide, with I think there was 1 paid employee in those years, was my grandfather, and I was a volunteer. But now we've grown into a fleet of 32 passenger vessels. We occupy Long Wharf right next door to the New England Aquarium. Our whale watch now is tied into a partnering agreement with the New England Aquarium. The aquarium provides us with naturalist and scientific expertise so that the passengers that are coming to us to go out and see these magnificent creatures get the benefit of good scientific data and information while they're out there. In addition to that, those scientists and those naturalists are gathering all sorts of information on whale behavior, photographs of whale. I think we have one of the largest singular databases of humpback whales in the Northeast. And whale watching has been recognized now by our tourism leadership as being a very significant part of what attracts tourists, particularly from Europe or Asia, to Boston. So it's been a very overwhelmingly beneficial thing for our company and for our state and for our region. In recent years, about 2 years ago, we got into, this is a picture of our facility at Long Wharf on a typical Sunday afternoon. We don't run just whale watching, we run sightseeing cruises, a thrill ride thing called Cardzilla, and a bunch of other fun things to do on the Boston waterfront. It's become very much of an amusement park on water. But what we got into in more recent years was some offshore support work. This is one of our whale watch boats and the humpback whales that we visit out on the bank. But in more recent years, there's been the development of 2 offshore LNG terminals. They call them terminals, but they're really low infrastructure terminals in Massachusetts Bay. The terminals themselves are 10 miles west of Stellwagen Bank, so in very close proximity to it. And of course, there was a lot of concern at the point that the 2 LNG companies that were proposing the development, the build-out of these 2 terminals, began proposing them, what that would mean for Stellwagen Bank. There was a tremendous amount of discussion, a tremendous amount of research done. The 2 LNG firms that were eventually awarded the right to build the 2 terminals spent about $5 million in mitigation money through the federal EPA in the state of Massachusetts to make certain that what they were doing out there was environmentally safe and non-impacting to the whale population. And one of the upside benefits of that mitigation was the installment of 10 acoustical buoys along the shipping lanes that run through Stellwagen Bank by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute that are completely funded by the 2 LNG operators. And those acoustical buoys need continuous maintenance, deployment, and recovery. And we were fortunate enough to get involved with Cornell University, who also maintains about 24 Maru buoys out on the site, to deploy and maintain those things. So this awareness of our environment and the uptick in consciousness and conservation, particularly in the ocean around Boston and Massachusetts, has had a tremendous impact on our business. And we see that now moving also into the offshore commercial work, which was something that we never would have expected to be into. So I guess my message to those of you that are concerned about the establishment of sanctuaries, it's almost like a national park. To us, it was tremendously beneficial. It's been great for Massachusetts, great for our company, and I think it's great for any region into which you're fortunate enough to have one.
Thank you very much. And next, we'll hear from Mike McCartney, who is the president and CEO of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, who comes more from the public sector perspective.
Aloha, and aloha to all of you. Greetings from the people from the Hawaiian Islands. Thank you, Congressman, for talking about how we live in an island community. We have a great sanctuary there, and we're very, very proud of it, whale watching sanctuary. And so today I wanted to leave you with 3 takeaways and then tell you a story, a couple stories, and end with a story of hope. So the first takeaway that I'd like to leave with you, since we live in an island community, an island state, and our major export is tourism, is number 1, people. People are more important than rules, regulations, policies, and procedures. It's still going to take people to make things happen. People make things happen. People are more important than power and money. And the most important thing about working with people and building community is communication, common understanding, and trust. Number 2, the second takeaway. The ocean is our planet. We're all connected by the ocean. The oceans are bigger than all of us. We're not just a region, we are the ocean. If you look at the earth, it's blue, it's not green. If we save the ocean, we save the planet. The third takeaway, balance is needed. You think about it, equilibrium, homeostasis, the natural order, they all apply to yourself personally, to a community, to a state, to a region, to the planet. Humans are just part of that ecosystem. We're not separate. We are part of that ecosystem. So the values of our host culture and indigenous people still work and still apply. They've learned many lessons about being stewards, about taking care, about sharing, and about respect. So here's a slide of the Hawaiian Islands. If you take a look at it, We are surrounded by water. We're 2,300 miles from the nearest landmass. We are ocean people. It is in our DNA, and we've learned many lessons over time. And we balance economics between our people, place, and culture, and our natural resources. If you think about Hawaii, and our major export is tourism, and it's about 18% of our state gross product. And that translates to about $14.2 billion, or 8 million visitors a year. That's $42 million a day, every day, that people like yourselves, thank you very much, saved your money. You saved your money, and you had to make a decision about where to go. And you chose Hawaii. And that's private capital coming into Hawaii, where people spend their money and get a wonderful experience. That $42 million a day adds up to $5 million in state tax revenue a day, every day. And that supports 170,000 jobs in Hawaii. Honolulu is the number 4 port of entry for the United States for international air travel. It's behind New York, Miami, Los Angeles, then Honolulu. If you think about Hawaii and an island community, we are the luckiest people in the world because one of our strategic advantages is that we have air travel. And we have 956 flights per week from 53 cities, from 20 different airlines. There's no other population of 1.3 million people that has that kind of access to the world. And if you think about tourism and the visitor industry, for every $100,000 that's spent in the United States by a traveler coming to the United States, it supports 1 U.S. job, according to the United States Department Chamber of Commerce. So when you look at Hawaii, we're surrounded by nature. Whale watching is important. People go out and do paddling. They do various activities on the ocean. And that's important to who we are. So in the Hawaii Tourism Authority, we get part of the transient accommodation tax. We put it back into ocean programs to protect the ocean. This next year, we're going to be putting in about $3 million in natural resource programs. Another $1 million goes to community-based natural resource programs that are funded by us, but are supporting NGOs in our community that protect the ocean. One that comes to mind is a baby turtle program that was created where they release baby sea turtles into the ocean every year, and visitors come and watch that experience. So it is a very important part of who we are as our brand, as our people, place, and culture. When you look at surfing, you think about surfing. Surfing is a Hawaiian sport. It was invented by Hawaiians. Why did they do it? So they could feel the mana. They could feel the spirit, the power of the earth. And they got on these boards and they rode these waves to get closer to that feeling, that spirit. Today, surfing is a $20 billion worldwide industry. $20 billion. They were brilliant back then. Canoeing, this is Waikiki Beach, better known as Mamala Bay. And it's a very special place because you can stay in a hotel, you can get out that day, ride a canoe and feel the ocean, or go surfing, or go sailing, go swimming, lie on the beach, go watch some Hawaiian music and entertainment, all right there, and have a great meal. And Waikiki, what we like to say is it's our fish pond. Ancient Hawaiians had fish ponds that they took care of to feed their populations. And Waikiki, Mamala Bay is our modern-day fish pond. We just spent $2 million restoring the beach, bringing some sand back in, and it was a private-public partnership with the Hawaii Tourism Authority, the state of Hawaii, and Kioia Corporation that owns the Sheraton Hotel put money back in to restore the beach there. So private-public partnerships do work, and they're great. These are some of the ocean recreation activities we have. Atlantis Submarine. We have so many activities out there, from fishing, jet skis, dinner cruises, diving, whale watching, dolphin watching, many type of activities out there. And that leads to the story that I'd like to share with you. And it's about my experience as a former state senator back in 1990, 1991. And I'll just share that story of, I guess, how you find balance. Back then, I represented this area called Kaneohe Bay, and it's a Great Barrier Reef. It's one of the few barrier reefs outside of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and it's a very special and protected area. Many of the ancient Hawaiian fish ponds were filled to put housing development, so there's only a few fish ponds left. There are multiple users in the bay, from scientists at Coconut Island, the Institute for Marine Biology, to sailboats from the Kaneohe Yacht Club, to recreational fishermen. Then what started happening is the tourism business started in Kaneohe Bay, where I grew up. And busloads of tourists would get off the pier and get into boats, and catamarans would tie up to each other. And pretty soon there'd be 3, 4, sometimes 500 people a day in the water riding jet skis. And it started to get tenuous. So I decided to go out one day and see what was happening. And this young man came up in his jet ski and said, "Get out of here, you don't belong here." I said, "Who said?" He said, "The law says." I said, "What do you mean the law says?" He said, "You don't belong here. This is our place." I said, "What if I want to come here?" He said, "No, this is our place." And so what did I do as a legislator who didn't know much? I put in a bill to ban jet skis on Saturdays and Sundays in Kaneohe Bay. Wow, was that a lesson for me or what? Because we did, and it passed. With all the lobbying and all the efforts, it passed. I was a freshman legislator. The bill passed. What happened? I forgot I had a campaign. Wow, so I had to run for re-election because my term was only 2 years that year. And so my friends who I grew up with were holding signs against me, to campaign against me. This guy's taking away our jobs in Kaneohe Bay. And I had to go through a whole election of fighting, that drama. But fortunately got reelected, and then sat down with some of the jet ski operators after the election when an elder in the community said, "Can't you just get together and talk?" So we did. And what we ended up doing was coming up with a unique idea. We came up with this issue called carrying capacity. And we said, how many boats can we really have out there? How many people can you carry per permit? And what are the rules and regulations out there? So we actually settled for 5 permits. We actually settled for a carrying capacity of 96 passengers. And we actually allowed people to have permits. I gave them back Saturday in exchange for that. Went back to the legislature, changed the law, and now jet skis are only banned on Sundays and holidays. But that was a tremendous experience. It was painful. It was tough because people had to talk. Today we have a master plan for Kaneohe Bay, and there's also a Kaneohe Bay Council. I think the important thing goes back to people, that you got to get people involved within the community, and don't let it happen to you like how it happened to me, because I would say there's many lessons that could be learned if you just try to talk to people. And so I took that approach, and it was a great lesson. And now I'm ahead of the tourism agency, and all the tour companies see me, oh, that's the guy that banned jet skis. But we talk about how to find balance, and I think that it was a very, very interesting experience. This next picture is near and dear to me. It's called the Hokulea, and it's Hawaii's voyaging canoe. And the canoe really defined who we are back in 1975 when Hawaii was going through a renaissance. And I remember being in high school. And, Hawaiians have had a tough time. The government was overthrown, annexed by the United States in 1893. Our queen was overthrown, and she lost the Kingdom of Hawaii. There's been a lot of pain and challenges. And back in 1975, a group of voyagers got together through Pinky Thompson and said, we're gonna prove that we came from Tahiti, and we're gonna sail back to Tahiti. And they did that, and it awoke everyone. And I remember going on this boat the other day. I went on it as a guest of Nainoa Thompson, who's going to take this canoe around the world. And the lesson I learned on that canoe was that as we were voyaging out just to do a test run, because he's going to go on a worldwide cruise, and I'll tell you a voyage, and I'll tell you a little bit about it, is that we got out there and the canoe stalled. There was no wind. And I was one of 12 members of the canoe. What's the most important thing I had to do or learn how to do is tie knots. Not tie a granny, but tie a square knot. So the canoe stalled. I asked Nainoa, where are we? He said, we're right here. The canoe's only going 1.5 knots. I said, how do you know it? He goes, I can see the bubbles coming up in the hull of the canoe. I was just moving this quickly past the bubbles. I said, where are we going? He said, there, you see the water out there? We're going to go out there. That's where the wind is. So what we did was we took our sails down, readjusted them, changed the direction of our sails to fix with the wind, and then we started going. And I thought about it. It's just like how we are right now. If you look at what's going on, the wind has changed in our economy. What do? We blame each other. Democrats blame Republicans. Republicans blame Democrats. Congress blames the President blames Congress. Everybody's spending their time and energy blaming each other for who changed the direction of the wind when nobody did. But what do we have to do? We got to adjust our sails. What do we do on the Hokulea? We adjusted our sails. What happened? The canoe started going again in the direction we needed to do. And so there's great lessons from this canoe. And the leader of this canoe is Nainoa Thompson. You see him on the right. Master navigator who learned how to navigate from Mao, who is from Micronesia, who helped Hawaiians remember the art of navigation. The person on the left is CHOW, who was lost on one of the voyages and one of the most famous lifeguards in the world at Waimea Bay, where he rescued 500 people and never lost a life. And this canoe is going to voyage around the world. And this is Nainoa the other day at the blessing of it. And if you look at it, the planet, that's the Earth rising over the moon. And that's blue, not green. That planet is blue, not green. And what Nainoa wants to do is take this canoe around the world to tell 1,000 stories about the ocean, to share that if we protect the ocean, we protect the world. If we protect biodiversity, we got to protect the ocean. To protect the atmosphere, we got to protect the ocean. To protect life on Earth, we have to protect the ocean. So he's going to take this canoe for 4.5 years around the world with an escort vessel. He's going to have Google Earth follow it. He's going to have National Geographic and Smithsonian, and they're going to tell 1,000 stories of precious sanctuaries and places around the globe and how we need to protect our ocean. And it's something we're very, very proud of, and I hope all of you get involved with it. And so in closing, I think this is the most important thing, that we believe this in Hawaii. These are some great people here, George Cam and George Downing on the extreme right. That's in Mamala Bay. Auntie Pilahi Paki, who said this quote. That's Nainoa and Mao, and that's Duke Kahanamoku, one of our famous surfing legends. Auntie Pilahi told us that the world will turn to Hawaii as they search for world peace, because Hawaii has the key, and that key is aloha. So aloha to all of you, and hope that we all work together to save our oceans for the future. Mahalo.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Tom Schmidt, who is the president and CEO of the Texas State Aquarium, to bring a different perspective from the educational world.
Sure. Well, this was exciting. I'm excited to be here today. When we first talked about this panel, I'm kind of going to wear a couple different hats. I've been fortunate for the last 15 years to be the president of the Texas State Aquarium, and for about the last 10 years serving on the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Corpus Christi. So, I was really listening to what the congressman was saying about tourism and the importance of that, and that's something I'm very passionate about. I was trained as a marine biologist, but I've been in the tourism business for 25 years, and so this really is a sort of a nexus of a lot of things I care about. Our aquarium is located in Corpus Christi. The mission of our aquarium is to connect people with nature and hopefully with that inspire a conservation ethic in all of our visitors that enjoy our programming. And we see a little over 500,000 people every year and about 60,000 school kids that participate in a lot of our different programming. Despite our name, we're a private 501c3. We've got a very active wildlife rehabilitation program and a lot of different educational programs and a lot of partners. And one of our great partnerships is with NOAA and with the National Marine Sanctuary program. And one of our most popular exhibits is a recreation of the Flower Gardens Reef, which is, as all you know, is a sanctuary. And so being able to tell the story about the sanctuary and why it's important to protect it, and what treasure we have in the Gulf with this northernmost coral reef in the entire North American area. It's a really compelling story. And so I think working with NOAA and working with the NOAA education folks, both here in Washington and at the Flower Gardens Bank, is really given us an opportunity to tell some really important stories. So we've always been very excited about that. A little bit about our community. And the congressman would know the answer to this, but if you think about the number one attraction in our region, it's not the Texas State Aquarium. We're number 2, but we're not number 1, and we probably never will be number 1, because the number 1 attraction is the beach, much like it is in California. And the our city traditionally really was an oil and gas refining trade. We have a 7th largest port in the country in terms of volume. But in the last 20 to 25 years, tourism has really emerged as sort of the third leg of the economy in Corpus Christi. And right now it's a little over $1 billion a year industry. And we sort of term nature tourism pretty broadly. And if a family from Dallas or San Antonio comes to the beach, we call them nature tourists. So it's, and I think why that's important for us is that we're constantly trying to develop a balance. We've got some of the largest undeveloped barrier islands in the country. And that's why people are drawn to our region, because of the sort of the wild beauty of our beaches. And to be able to maintain that but still allow access is kind of a constant challenge that we face. And so, for example, our Convention and Visitors Bureau is very focused on preserving these areas to the point where we're actually committing funds. You know, some of the hotel occupancy tax that we collect, actually we go out and do interpretations of the natural parks. Not all the money is just going to advertising. We feel it's so important that we deliver a very good, very educational tourism product to the folks who visit. Guide certification programs. We've developed a number of programs where fishing guides and birding guides can get certified by the CVB. And we really help train them in terms of what's the best information to share with their visitors, to share with the people who pay money to go out and sightsee and fish, and so that they understand the importance of the economy or the ecosystem and why it's important to our economy. So I think if we talk about that balance of coastal tourism and economic development, it's a really important piece of what we're struggling with in our community. And I think we're really beginning to embrace that right balance, because we understand that, you know, in all likelihood, 20 or 30 years from now, there won't be refineries in Corpus Christi anymore. There certainly will be less. And the oil and gas industry and the energy sector is certainly transforming in our state, and more so recently. But tourism, if we do it right, ecotourism, nature tourism, will never go away, because our barrier islands, they'll move a little bit due to hurricanes, but they're never going to go away completely. And that's a resource that I think everyone in our community appreciates and understands and wants to protect. So we're struggling still with the right amount of balance, but I think we're moving toward a better balance. And it's certainly our leadership understands the importance of that. And so that's why I'm particularly interested in how our discussions progress over the next half hour to an hour. So
thank you. Appreciate it. And last but not least, Pat Marr will be representing the American Hotel and Lodging Association.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm really honored to be here. We're a hotelier in the hotel business. I'm here representing the American Hotel Lodging Association. It's the sole organization that represents all the hoteliers, hotel companies, and all the hotels as an organization. We're their voice here on Capitol Hill, and we have a chapter in every one of our states. Our industry itself is in 2012 we had a little over 56,000 properties, hotels in the U.S., and out of that there was almost 5 million guest rooms, and we employ a little bit more than 1.8 million employees in our industry, and we generate about 140 billion in sales. God bless you. But these hotels, and what I'm here to talk about, is not about how the industry is, but basically tie that into our economic impact and what we do, and how we as an industry for the last 10 years have really looked into that. The hotel spent a little over $8 billion in energy, generated about 7 million tons of waste, and consumed about 64 trillion gallons of water. And generated, and we roll it all up into CO2, we generated about 23 million tons of CO2. That was last year. What we do is part of the American Hotel Lodging Association. We have an educational, not-for-profit foundation. And it's an educational program. We have certification programs for hoteliers in all the positions within a hotel. And part of we realized about 10 years ago, and I was part of the group that formed a committee. We formed a Green Task Force, and it's comprised of 12 members of the top hotel brands that operate in the United States. And we all came together, and we put together the competitiveness side and all that. We wanted to share all the resources we could. At that time, I was an executive with Marriott, and I headed up their design and engineering programs, along with all their facilities programs, corporate-wise. And I, at that time, formed a committee within the company, and then from there, we developed it within the association. It was a good way of doing it. And the Green Task Force is funded through this nonprofit group. There's a lot of research that goes involved in it. There's a lot of guidelines and things. And I would issue to have more information about it, go to ahla.com/green, and you'll see all the initiatives and all. And one of the things that we do is we share this initiative with the world, not just within the U.S. So it's open to everybody, all the practices and the things that we do with it. And just to talk about it, just 8 years ago, an eco hotel was kind of in a niche market. But today, it's really a commonplace. TripAdvisor just launched a green engage program, which is really going to change the face of how you make a decision if you want to stay in a green hotel and where it is. So just a few things I wanted to talk about. I've been a member of the HLA for over 30 years. And one of the things that we've just done in the last few years, and it was right after President Obama announced the Better Buildings Alliance everywhere, what we did as an association, we got our top 12 hotel brands, and I can name them, but they're all the top brands that you can imagine. They have somewhere between 500 to 5,000 hotels under their group. And we developed some goals for 2020. It's very similar to what the president's was on, by reducing energy by 20% by 2020. But we also took it further, and we did 30% reduction in water and 30% in waste. And we got all our major brands to agree to this. And if you go on any of their websites and you go into their corporate social responsibility area, you'll see that. And you'll look at it from a Starwood to a Marriott to a Hyatt to a Hilton, Choice, all those, and you look and you say, everybody's got the same goal. It's because we as an organization developed that. We're developing plans and all around it. And in finishing, because I have a lot of examples that I could tell you, and maybe we'll do this in a Q&A, but just to tell you, 7 years ago, most hotel companies didn't have any environmental positions within their organizations. Today, they all do. Our organizations and myself personally help write a lot of those job descriptions, help with hiring them, help with developing and all. So this is a group that's very tight. We don't compete each other within our organizations and our destinations. We do it. It's an always sharing thing. And what we're seeing now is since the 7 years, and every hotel kind of measures this, we're seeing the associates, the retention rate in our industry. We talked about 1.8 million associates. Well, we used to have a 45% turnover rate. It's way down. Now, I know the economy had a lot to do with it, but a lot of the hotel groups look at that, and we see that to be a tremendous benefit. But the other thing, in closing, I want to say is energy, water, and waste is about 5% of the total cost of running the hotel operations. It was 30 years ago when I got into the industry, and it's almost still that today. If we reduce pretty much the major items 20% by 2020, we'll drop a whole 1% in cost operational off of the thing. And that's where we see economic growth and development in.
Thank you. And thank you very much, all of you, for sharing your perspectives. I think some themes have emerged from this conversation, one of which is transformation. The transformation of the hotel industry as a whole, the transformation of a community, the transformation of a private business, and the transformation, I think, of a public official in terms of how we do our business. And one of the key parts of this, and I think you touched on this when you talked about people make things happen and communication, and you talked about this in the 5 years from a 70% thank you but no thank you to a we must have this and expand conversation. So I'm wondering, very practically, not sort of, I'm sure everybody here has heard the kind of stakeholder engagement is important, but what changed? What do you think changed? And I'd like to start, Rick, with you as a private business owner. You know, your payroll is on the line, and you're involved with people who are telling you have to do business in a different way. Can you talk to us about what was that process that got you to think differently about what you do?
Well, I think we approached, when the sanctuary was first established in 1992, and I was fortunate enough to be appointed to as one of the seats on the advisory council, I think we tried to approach it with an open mind without knowing exactly where we were all going to end up. And I think by having done that, by walking in with an open mind and not being presumably negative about where we may end up, we entered into a very positive dialogue about what the potential was, both harmful and beneficial for the sanctuary with regard particularly to whale watching and boat activity on the bank. And I think because both the government side and the appointee side running the headquarters there in Scituate and the industry as a whole, for the most part, was very positive about maintaining an open mind and an open dialogue in the beginning, we had some great results, particularly with regard to the formation of the guidelines to which we all operate under. After the guidelines came the right whale restrictive speed zones, both seasonal management areas and dynamic management areas, which were instituted about 5 years ago. Everybody within the industry, not just the whale watch industry, but tugboat operators, shipping owners, and that's what we're very concerned about where all that new regulatory process was going to take us. In effect, it's been in effect now for 5 years, and it's been very benign. There's been almost no impact on any of the industries. And at the end of the day, I think it's all beneficial because, as Mike says, we have to recognize that we're very fortunate to have life on this planet as individuals, and it's a planet that's worth protecting, and every piece of life on this planet is worth protecting and supporting. So I think the mindset, at least in the shipping industry and in the small passenger vessel industry and the tugboat industry in the Boston area, has completely shifted, and I don't think anybody saw that happening 10 years ago.
Thank you. And actually, the very first question is almost exactly the same question, except for particularly interested in how you overcame the 70% opposition.
Yeah, one of the words we used when we prepared for this panel was trust. And I think that's really what developed was a trust. And that was partially through the advisory council process where the sanctuary is about the community, and the community has a voice in how it's ran and the decisions we make. And it was more than just inviting different aspects of the community to our advisory council, but the sanctuary actually being on these various groups, the Chamber of Commerce, the city, when we own their issues, they'll own our issues, not just asking them to come in for a public meeting. And I think that's really what switched it. And you mentioned something about the expansion. What I think is what's happened in all these is that it's really projecting these special places that we're protecting, that people are coming to visit them and they want their special places protected. And as they see community members involved, that there's now a demand for more protection, not just growing our existing sanctuaries, but throughout the country. And we're seeing a call for more sanctuaries in the Great Lakes. And they can come to our community and talk to people that opposed it before but now love it today. And it's really, I think it is that trust, and that's what we talk about in Hawaii particularly.
That's very interesting. Let me see if I can read the writing here. It says, Congressman Farr spoke about beaches and after public trust resources as undervalued and the need to think more like Wall Street. On the other hand, other panelists referred to the major economic impacts of the ocean-based tourism. How do we marry these two concepts? Should we be charging more for beach access? Should we be redistributing revenue from hotels and airfare to protecting the resources that people pay to see? Mike, perhaps you'd like to start with that.
The key word is balance. I think if you talk about Wall Street or you talk about the community, you talk about environment, you talk about economics, it's balance. So I would say that it is about finding that balance. That last year, domestic airline carriers made an average of 21 cents per passenger profit. So their balance is very, very, very tight. So to get people to a destination, if you're traveling by air, you got to understand how sensitive it is. To run a hotel, there's sensitivities there. So we have a hotel room tax. We always have to make sure that it's not too high because there's other choices out there. So it is trying to find that balance between the two. So I think when you talk about ROI, there's multiple ROIs. One is return on investment. I think the other is just an experience. I think that people are willing to pay for an experience if it's a lifetime memory and something that they can pass on to the next generation. I'm sure your family has created so many experiences out in the harbor that they'll remember for generations to come, and that's priceless. So again, it's balancing those two, and I wish we did have an answer, but I don't think there's a magic answer to do that yet.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, it varies state by state, but I would encourage anyone to work with their local Conventions Visitors Bureau and understand how that hotel occupancy tax can be used. For example, in our community, of the percentage, the 7 to 8 million that we collect locally, we use about $1 million of that to clean up beaches. And so, and that's something that we decide along with our city council. And so there's different ways to fund that. Some put it all into marketing, some put it all into, art museums. And so there's a lot of flexibility, but really understanding that without a clean beach, you're not going to get tourism. So it makes sense to invest some of that money that the tourists are bringing into the city to invest in that really important resource.
I think that's a really good point. And one of the other themes I heard from all of you was exactly that not only the communities with respect to the tax dollars or revenues that were coming in, but in exchange for some of the contracts. I think you mentioned the buoys and the reinvestment that's happening from the private sector in order to conduct business are having to or stepping up to reinvest in the resource itself, in education and other aspects. I think in the hotel industry there may be some good examples.
Yes, a good example of it, anytime you develop any building anywhere, like this building or a hotel down the street, there's some costs of developing it that you have to pay in the infrastructure. It's hooking up to the water system, the sewer system, and all. When you do a hotel on a coastal area or on a waterfront area, there was a picture of the Boston Long Wharf Marriott. I actually worked and helped on the design of that. It was like Marriott's 380th hotel, and they have 5,000 now. That's how far I go back. And I was an electrical engineer on a team developing that hotel. But they actually put that hotel out on, they built that area. It was all pile-ins, and they filled it in. So it's on a man-made type of a area. But what we did is there was costs that was in part of that hotel, and it's almost in every coastal hotel or anything that you're doing. There's a development fee that you're going to pay to adjust the beach, make sure that it ecologically is going to be a safe area there. The systems that we put in there could never leak. There's double and triple redundancy type of systems in that hotel, because if not, it goes out in the harbor, whatever the waste is, whatever. So there's always things that an impact that you do. It costs a lot more doing the construction of it, but that's what you're there for. It's like here. Look at this wonderful view of the Capitol. I mean, this building is pristine. Well, that could be an ocean, or it could be a lake, and all. So when you do the development, a lot of times you can spend up to 10 or 15% more on a building in a waterway, and it isn't because the foundation costs more, or it's about what the impact is, what you're doing with the environment. And we're always looking at that and trying to make a difference and fitting in with the community.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions. Obviously, any panel of this kind needs to address the very thorny and concerning subject of climate change. And what, can you share with us some of the thinking? There are various approaches in the questions, but what kind of planning is going in? What kind of mitigation is happening now?
I think in Hawaii, we're doing a study right now at Sea Grant to look at climate change and its impact on coastal tourism communities. So we're actually engaged in a long-range study to look at those kind of impacts. But I think as travelers begin to travel around the world, they are going to look at their carbon footprint. And as a destination, we need to look at ourselves and say, how are we addressing that? So, for example, one idea in Waikiki that's being talked about, it's led by a hotel corporation, the CHOW Corporation, is taking seawater from deep seawater and using it to cool the air conditioning system. So no longer will you have to use fossil fuels to run the air conditioning systems and use that water. What if all of Waikiki was powered, the air conditioning systems were powered by the conversion of cold water in the air conditioning systems and then put back into the ocean? That would be an attractive destination to people because their carbon footprint when they come here would be less than other destinations. And I think we are looking hard at that to see what we can do to be in alignment with that and make sure that we can produce products that add value in that form.
For those of you who think this may be the solution to NOAA's funding problem, I will point out that unfortunately I don't believe they get revenues or hold a patent on that particular technology, unfortunately. But it is quite brilliant. Yes, you want to talk about what the
just
impact
to talk
on the hotel
about,
sector?
you know, I did tell you about how many CO2 million tons that the industry, we track that now. We've been tracking it for about the last 3 years. All the major hotel companies are part of the Carbon Disclosure project. And what we did last year is all the hotel groups in the U.S. connected with all the ones in Europe, major companies, and we developed a way of measuring carbon per room and per meeting guests. So, and there's a calculator, and you'll see it on all the hotels' websites. And you'll see it on our website, but it's a common way of measuring what a room night is and what a meeting stay is. So we came together as an industry around the world and did this. So.
Thank you. Yes.
So in the Great Lakes, as other places are worrying about sea level rise, we're seeing record lows, water, which is having huge economic impact. And I think throughout the sanctuary program and national parks, as we become more aware of the economic impact of these places, the climate change is impacting the resources that people are coming to see, and I think it's making people more aware. The community that I live in is a very industrial place, not a green tree-hugging type community, but they now look at Lake Huron and the environment differently because of this designation as a special place, and they're more protective of it. They want to see the right things done. Small things from trying to ban plastic bags to fertilizer and all that are starting to happen in a community 10 years ago you never would have thought. So I think that box makes a national designation really matters to how people look at their own community. So.
And so those are sort of mitigating. We don't want tourism to become part of the problem. At the same time, anybody who looks at a map and sees what the potential impacts of climate change could be with respect to water has to be able to be concerned about existing investments. Right. And so, you know, on your business or in your destinations or representing hotels, have you all looked at those maps and thought about them?
Mm-hmm. With regard to our operation, we have definitely noticed a higher elevation of tides in the last 2 years. And it's been quite dramatic. Immediately after Sandy, it was very dramatic. And it held in. The elevations of the high tides actually stayed high for almost 2 months after Sandy. I'm not certain what the cause of that was, but it's enough of a concern for us because we're operating out of Long Wharf, which was built in 1710, relatively low elevation above sea level. I think it has a 13.8.
It does.
Something like that.
Very low.
Yeah, so we are very concerned about where we end up in the future relative to having a pier that's not below water at high tide. So we are taking some mitigating steps in the immediate future because we have floating infrastructure at that fixed pier from which we operate to elevate the pilings that carry that infrastructure to make certain that we'll be able to operate in the future. But how the city addresses that, because Boston is an old city, has a lot of lower elevations along its entire waterfront, is a much bigger challenge and a much bigger problem. But it is real. I can report that it is real. We're seeing it in the field, and we're taking whatever steps we can take to try to deal with it as it approaches us.
And just as a follow-on, do you think your leadership is beginning to, I mean, obviously it's not just a tourism problem. You point out that this is a whole problem for the community. Do you feel that the leadership is recognizing and beginning to put plans and discussions in place, or is everybody sort of saying, well, it ain't happening now, so?
There's a very active quasi-political organization in Boston called the Boston Harbor Associates, and there's a Save the Harbor, Save the Bay. And both those organizations are working very closely with the mayor's office and the governor's office on sea level elevation changes. And so there is a lot of focus on it, a lot of attention being paid to it. But I think everybody recognizes that the infrastructure challenge is almost impossible to deal with.
Yeah.
So, and I think, oh, go ahead.
No, go
what
ahead.
else we're going to have to do is, all of us, we got to think about what we do with these every time we use them. I mean, it's going to be a personal transformation and commitment from each one of us as individuals to saying that the problem is not just something we could put a dam around our city, because it is the planet. So we're going to have to work on initiatives with each other. And so I think travel is still important, because what travel does is get people together. It brings people together. They share each other's food. They get to experience each other. And you can actually find solutions by people meeting face to face and by people talking with each other. And that's what I think we're going to have to do. So ironically, we are talking about the travel industry, but I think the travel industry can be very, very much a part of that solution, because it brings people together.
Yeah, you can't re-nourish the beach
Yeah.
often enough to solve
No.
this problem. There has to
No.
be a macro solution. You had a, thank you,
No,
you had a comment?
no, you were getting something handed to you.
Oh, okay.
The one thing I would say that just about Boston itself, probably a lot of you heard of the Big Dig. Well, basically, almost all the Big Dig is underwater. So it's tunnels, it's all below sea level, the way it is, from the river to the bay. And when the engineers were first developing this, and they were developing it about 26, 27 years ago, they had a certain level of the sea. Well, it's up about 19 inches, and it could be up 30, 35 inches in the next 25 years. So their planning and all, what they did was it's an interesting engineering phenomenon that they have. And that's just one area. I mean, if it's rising in Boston, it's here, and it's doing this everywhere, especially on the East Coast. So.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to one other sort of downer question, which has to do with the hotels on the coastline affected after Sandy. This is a similar kind of thing, but I think it's an interesting perspective. I come from South Carolina, and we've had these challenges with hurricanes before. So after Sandy or similar natural disasters, the question is, are any hotels on the coastline affected? And then when they are rebuilding, are they considered rebuilding back from the shoreline? What can any of you talk about that particular dynamic? I can share some information.
I can talk a little bit about Sandy, and I can talk a lot about Katrina, because I lived Katrina, and I had 18 hotels down in New Orleans when that hit. But a similar thing as far as answering the question. But one of the things that FEMA and the local jurisdictions want is their hotels back open as quickly as they could. And in the case of Katrina, we couldn't open them up that quick, so they were able to bring cruise ships in to have people. But you wouldn't believe the mass of people that you need, not the first week after a storm, but after that, and the infrastructure. So hotels are always something that they want to open up reopen right away. But they also want to do it in a balance of making sure that if they are 40, 50 years old, and their infrastructure is lower than it should be from the tides or whatever, they want to correct those, and they want to do some things like it. And then in most cases, insurance companies get involved in it, and they all do the risk. So it all works out to be where it's really interesting about how a hotel, when it's rebuilt, it's better than ever, and it's safer than ever, because now everybody's kind of looking at it, and they're making it a big deal, like after Sandy. And if you saw Governor Chris Christie, with the president a week and a half ago, the Jersey Shore back and all. Well, what's back is all the hotels and the motels and all. And they really did it in a way. And a lot of the early stimulus money went into that to try to build that back up. And now they're doing the other.
Thank you. Here's a rather specific question, but I'm wondering whether or not, we don't have anybody on the panel here from Virginia, but it may apply to some of your experience in Texas. It says that tomorrow the House Natural Resources Committee is holding a hearing to try to force the president to open the Virginia coast and Outer Banks to offshore drilling. Does a cumulative dollar value on our existing clean coast tourism economy, in conjunction, in this case, with the mission-critical naval base, I think the question is a little bit oddly articulated, but it says, what are these baseline economies worth, and how do you judge that? I know you in Texas obviously have this energy versus clean tourism dialogue going on.
Well, and I think the tragedy from the Macondo blowout, I think, really brought a lot of focus into the Gulf of Mexico economy, balancing the fishery, tourism, and the oil and gas exploration. We have demonstrated in many cases that it can be successfully and safely done. And if you look at the flower gardens is a great example. If you look at that pristine environment, there are hundreds of production platforms within probably a 50-mile radius of that sanctuary. And so it can be done safely if the proper guidelines and policies are in place. And so that's obviously where the federal government has a huge role. But it's as Dr. McKinney talked about this morning, that is going to continue. There is going to be more oil and gas exploration in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's been significant advances since Deepwater in terms of the containment and what they've learned, and so I think we've done a reasonably good job balancing that in the Gulf of Mexico. I think each state and is going to have to really understand how the ecology responds to something like that. As Larry mentioned this morning, the Gulf of Mexico sort of is because of the seepage of oil and gas naturally, they've got that biota that is somewhat of a buffer zone to protect from spills, and the western North Atlantic or the Alaskan waters may not have that, and so it's got to be a different discussion in each area. But it's a big one.
And I think one of the themes that we've been reaching for, which may, I think, be helpful is that clearly this is a dialogue that has to happen on the local level. And to your point, you can regulate or legislate, but at the end of the day, all of the stakeholders have to be around. And it's not always a matter of either or. It's sometimes a matter of how. And so
how matters.
Yes. So, any other thoughts about that particular process? And you
well,
mentioned
as we were
almost losing
speaking
your
earlier,
job.
I think speaking earlier, the how matters, and just holding a community meeting or public hearing and saying, "What do you think?" is one thing, but really listening. I think, as policymakers, sometimes we talk at each other instead of with each other. The community is tired of hearing us talk at them. They want to hear us engage in a dialogue. And so I think even the way you set up a meeting and the way you issue an invitation, as Peter Block says, is so important. You can't just say, this is what we're going to do, what do you think? That doesn't work anymore. You got to have a genuine conversation where you have communication, common understanding, and trust. So I think the how you set things up can go a long way in saving a lot of time and energy.
And again, not necessarily, I think you talked about coming into the conversation with an open mind. I'd be interested in your experience in this. You obviously had a tremendous community dialogue over the course of that 5 years to transform public opinion and engage people in doing things. It seems to me that when you describe your community, you were not talking about doing things one thing and not another. It was a question of how they were integrated, how your quality of life and tourism and other things were part of a whole, not necessarily pieces in opposition.
Yeah, and
how did that come about?
And I think we've mentioned the advisory council. It's the groups that every sanctuary has, and it really is a representation of this cross of the entire community, from education to the business community to local governments, and it's really that everybody at the same table, owning the same problem, and not just the problem, but that looking for opportunity, and then that's really how it changed. It went from this sanctuary as an opportunity for our community, and I think that's really where it twisted the dialogue. So,
with respect to the aspect of the question regarding quantifying, and I think the congressman also referenced this, can any of you talk about how you all have worked to sort of quantify the ocean economies or those trade-offs or impacts in your communities? You may or may not have specific examples of how that was done. It's an emerging discipline.
We're working on it now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's. I think it is a challenge. I'll be very interested to go and look at what the the Institute is doing in that regard. I think that may be a real opportunity for this community, as well as for the travel and tourism industry. Yeah. Oh, it says we're supposed to wrap it up, so I will. Obviously, I'm fascinated by this conversation. So I want to thank all of our panelists for a very interesting discussion, for all that you do, for sharing it with us. I'm sure you'll be available after this and by email for specific questions that may not have come up. You've
Absolutely.
been very generous in sharing your experience. So thank you very much. And I think the takeaways are pretty clear here. So I don't need to wrap those up for you. But what I also would like to do is to thank this audience. And I would like to thank you all for your participation in this dialogue, but also for the work that each of you does every day to preserve these resources and to help save our oceans and to help move this conversation forward. And speaking, I know, for the panel members and the travel and tourism industry as a whole, we really look forward to continuing this conversation and this productive dialogue and to transform the way we all do business together. So thank you.
Great job.